The gates of the royal palace opened with a deep, loud sound. The crowd in the great hall turned their heads. Guards stood ready, their weapons tight in their hands. Servants froze in fear. And the queen of the Kelnari Empire, Zara the Fierce, sat high on her throne with sharp eyes. A man was walking into the hall. He was not tall, not heavy, and he wore no armor. His clothes were simple, black with a silver stripe across the chest. He had no weapon, no army behind him, just one human, walking calmly into the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Who dares enter the court without kneeling? One guard shouted. The man did not stop. He looked up at the queen with no fear. "I am Captain Riven of Earth," he said in a calm voice. "I am here to talk." The court exploded with laughter. Alien nobles, generals, and commanders laughed. Loudly, even the queen smiled, not kindly, but with mockery. "A human?" she said, standing up. "Earth is a weak planet, full of soft people and slower minds. You came here alone?" "Yes," Riven answered simply. "I don't need an army to speak the truth." Gasps filled the air. The queen's eyes narrowed. She didn't like being challenged, especially by a human. "You're brave," she said coldly. "Or foolish." Turned to her side, where a tall warrior stood in shining armor. He had red skin, 4 eyes, and muscles like steel. His name was General Luthek, her strongest champion. "Luthek," the queen said, "show this human the meaning of power. Humiliate him in front of all." The hall grew silent. Even the guards stepped back. Everyone knew what was coming. Luthek walked toward Riven, his boots shaking the ground. He smiled, not in joy, but in hunger. He had crushed many enemies, but never fought a human before. He thought this would be fun. Riven did not move. He placed his hands behind his back. His body relaxed, his eyes steady. Luthek raised his hand and pointed at Riven. "No armor, no blade, no chance," he said. "Do you wish to die quickly or slowly?" Riven answered, "I'm not here to die." Then he added softly, "You should be careful." Luthek laughed and charged. The floor shook as he ran, fast like a beast. His fist flew toward Riven's head with full power, but the punch never landed. Riven had already moved. With a single step, he dodged and spun behind Luthek. Before the crowd could blink, Riven tapped Luthek's back. Luthek roared and turned. Swinging again, Riven moved. Calm like wind, he ducked, stepped, and pushed gently. Luthek fell forward and rolled on the floor. The crowd gasped. Whispers filled the air. The queen stood up, her smile now gone. Luthek jumped up, angry now, he shouted. Charged again, faster, louder. But every attack missed. Riven didn't strike hard. He didn't need to. He let the general waste his strength. Finally, Riven stepped forward and kicked the back of Luthek's knee. The giant fell to one knee, breathing hard. Riven stood behind him, untouched. He leaned in close and whispered something only Luthek heard. Luthek dropped his sword. The queen looked down from her throne in disbelief. "No," she said, "impossible." The human had done it. He had humiliated the Empire's greatest warrior. Without drawing blood, Riven stepped back and looked at the queen. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, "but I won't let anyone humiliate me either." Silence ruled the hall. Not one voice, not one laugh. Even the air felt heavy. "Queen." Zara's fingers tightened around her golden scepter. This wasn't just a loss, it was shame, and in front of her entire court. But Riven only waited. Calm, silent. He didn't gloat, didn't brag. He simply stood like a man who knew who he was. The queen stared down at him, her pride burned, but inside her heart, another strange feeling began to grow. Who was this man? What kind of human could walk alone into her court, defeat her champion, and still speak with honor? She had no answer, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning, and she would not forget him. General Luthek stood in the center of the court, his breath heavy, his pride shattered. He had trained for years, won wars across galaxies. But today, in front of the queen and her entire court, he had been defeated by a human. The silence in the hall cut deeper than any blade. Eyes that once admired him now looked away, afraid, confused, even disappointed. Captain Riven, the human, stood still. No signs of injury, no fear on his face, just calm, steady eyes. He had not used brute force, not even a real weapon, yet he had made the Empire's strongest warrior kneel. Queen Zara's golden robe swayed as she slowly walked down the steps of her throne. Each step echoed in the hall like thunder. Her face showed no emotion, but her fingers gripped her staff tighter than ever. Her voice, when it came, was cold as ice. "Explain," she said to Luthek. He did not look up. "I failed my queen," he said, voice low. "He's not what I expected." A wave of anger passed through the court. Some shouted that it was dishonor. Others demanded punishment. But the queen raised one hand and silence returned. She turned to Riven, who bowed his head slightly. "I didn't come here to shame your warrior," he said. "I only defended myself." Zara stepped closer, now standing only a few steps away from him. Her golden eyes stared into his, looking for weakness, fear, lies, but found none. "You did more than defend," she said. "You embarrassed me." The tension grew heavy again. Guards moved closer, hands near their weapons, but Riven did not flinch. "I came alone, unarmed, to speak," he said. "But you chose to test me. You got your answer." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever," she said. "You think this was a game?" Riven gave no answer. The queen raised her voice so all could hear. "This man walks into my court, defeats my general, and expects to walk out? Is that what Earth teaches its people?" Riven tilted his head. "Earth teaches us to stand when we are challenged, to never kneel when we are right, and to never attack first." The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned her back to him and walked a few steps, then stopped. The court waited, breath held. Everyone knew what usually came next: punishment, exile, or execution. But then the queen did something unexpected. She turned again, raised her staff, and pointed at Luthek. "You failed me," she said. "You were supposed to show our power. You were supposed to make him crawl." Luthek remained on one knee. He didn't argue. He only waited for his sentence. Zara's next words shocked the entire hall. "For your failure," she said, "you shall marry him." No one spoke. Even Riven blinked slowly, unsure if he had heard right. The nobles gasped. The generals whispered. And one servant dropped a tray in shock. Luthek looked up, eyes wide. "My queen?" he asked, voice shaking. The queen stepped closer and raised her chin. "You lost in body and spirit," she said. "You shall now serve the man who defeated you. Every day, every hour, as a reminder." Luthek opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of the order crushed what little pride remained in him. Riven's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I don't want to humiliate him further." Zara laughed softly, not in humor, but in cruelty. "Then consider it a gift," she said. "Or a curse." She walked back to her throne, the court still silent. Shocked, confused, and afraid. No one dared question her command. Riven looked at Luthek, who now stood slowly, fists clenched, face hard to read. They both knew this was not marriage by choice, not by peace. It was punishment, a weapon of pride, turned against both of them as they stood in the middle of the hall, one human and one broken warrior. The queen's voice echoed once more. "Taken to the guest wing," she said. "Prepare the bond ceremony." Riven looked around the alien court, then at the warrior beside him. He had come to talk, but now he was part of something much larger. Something strange had begun, and deep inside, he felt it. This empire was not as strong as it looked, and the queen was hiding something. The sun never truly set on the capital of the Kalmari Empire. 3 moons floated above the horizon, casting pale blue light over the spires of the palace, inside the golden walls. The halls no longer buzzed with laughter or pride. Whispers replaced cheers, and eyes that once looked down on humans now looked with caution, curiosity, and something close to fear. Captain Riven stood alone in a wide chamber lit by floating orbs. The room had no doors, no windows, yet he had not been locked in. This was not a prison, but neither was it freedom. Silken robes, strange food, soft beds, all given without question, yet he knew what this was. It was the Empire's way of watching him, testing him, preparing something. The warrior Luthuk had not spoken a word since the Queen's order. He had walked beside Riven in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes hollow. Now he stood in the shadows of the room, unmoving, unreadable. Riven turned to him, voice calm. "You don't have to follow this." Luthuk didn't answer, not at first then. After a long silence he said, "She gave the order." Riven nodded slowly. "And you follow all orders, no matter how cruel?" Luthuk finally looked at him, his eyes heavy with shame. "I was born in war," he said. "I follow the one who wins. Today that is you." Riven said nothing. There were no words that could fix the damage the Queen had done. Not just to Luthuk, but to the pride of an entire people. Elsewhere in the palace, Queen Zara walked a quiet hall. Her face showed calm, but inside her mind, storms raged. She remembered the fight clearly, the way the human moved, how he read her. Champion, how he did not gloat, that calm, that control. It wasn't normal. She entered a dark chamber deep under the palace. Inside were 5 figures, dressed in black and silver, faces covered. The Queen did not need names. These were her shadows, her personal spies and assassins. "I want everything on Earth," she said, "and on him. Every record, every whisper, every secret." One shadow stepped forward, his voice flat and cold. "We already searched," he said. "There's little too little. He is not in any galactic registry, not in any human military file. He is a ghost." Zara's lips tightened. "Then follow the ghost," she said. "Break him open." Back in the chamber, Luthuk sat on the edge of the bed, his armor gone, his body quiet. Riven remained standing, arms folded, staring at the ceiling's slow-moving lights. "This marriage is a game to her," Luthuk said suddenly, "not a bond. Not honor." "I know," Riven replied. "But games reveal truth." Luthuk looked at him. Confused, Riven continued, "She's watching, testing both of us. She wants to see what I'll do with power, what you'll do with shame." A strange silence filled the air, not heavy, thoughtful. Then a knock echoed through the walls. Though there were no doors, a panel slid open, and a tall alien woman in red robes stepped inside. Her face was painted silver, her hands glowing faintly. "I am the ceremony keeper," she said softly. "The bond will be sealed at the rise of the 3rd moon." She placed a golden box on the floor and left without another word. The box pulsed with soft light. Luthuk stared at it. "I swore to serve the Queen," he said, "but this, I don't know what this is anymore." Riven stepped toward the box but didn't open it. "She's not in control of everything," he said quietly. "Not for long." Luthuk stood, uncertain. "Then what are you really doing here?" he asked. Riven turned to face him fully. His eyes were calm, but behind them, there was weight, years, pain, purpose. "I came to talk," Riven said. "But if they won't listen, I'll do what must be done." Outside the palace walls, in the shadows of the lower city, something else moved. One of the Queen's spies sat in a dark room, shaking. He had followed Riven's arrival path, studied the signal trail, and what he found terrified him. The human hadn't come through normal starports. He didn't arrive in any ship listed in the Empire's records. His vessel was cloaked in technology no Kelnari had ever seen, and stranger still, it was alive. The spy ran to send the report. He never made it. A shadow behind him moved, fast and silent. A silver flash, a single strike, and he fell, back inside the palace. Riven finally opened the golden box. Inside were 2 rings, glowing with soft blue light. But there was something else too, a folded message, written in a language not of this world. He read it, and his eyes darkened. The queen thought she had started a game, but she didn't know. The real game had begun the moment he stepped into her court, and the next move would be his asterisk. The sky above the capital never changed. It was always glowing, always blue, always perfect. A lie shaped by the empire to show control. But inside the palace, control was slipping. Whispers moved faster than light. A human had defeated the champion. A marriage had been ordered, and the queen, known for strength and cold logic, had acted out of emotion. Riven sat by the long window in his chamber, eyes on the stars. The ring from the golden box lay on the table beside him. Still untouched, it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. The bond ceremony was meant to begin soon. He hadn't decided if he would wear it. Behind him, Luthek stood by the wall, wearing no armor now. Only a plain black robe. He hadn't spoken since morning. He hadn't even eaten. The proud warrior was silent, heavy, like a statue made of regret. Finally he spoke, his voice flat. "She wants us to destroy each other." Riven nodded slowly. "Yes, she wants me to hate you, and you to own me." Luthek said, "She wants control, through shame." Riven turned to him, calm as ever. "But she doesn't understand humans. I don't want to break you. I want you to stand." Luthek didn't know how to answer. He was trained to fight, to follow, not to understand peace. But something in Riven's voice pulled at his thoughts. It didn't feel like weakness. It felt like choice. Far across the palace, Queen Zara stood alone in the throne room, staring at a glowing map of the stars. She was not at peace. Her fingers tapped against her golden chair, sharp and fast. The human was too calm, too clever. She had meant to punish him, but now the court had started to respect him. Worse, some were starting to question her. One of her generals had approached her in private, speaking softly. "Maybe the human can be useful," he had said. "Maybe. It's time we look at Earth as more than dust." She had not replied. But now, standing alone, her thoughts burned. If the people began to follow Riven's voice, she would lose more than pride. She would lose power. In the ceremony hall, the air smelled like silver fire. Flames danced in floating bowls, and strange music echoed from the walls. The bondkeeper stood at the center, her hands glowing blue. 2 rings rested on a crystal plate. Riven entered first. Walking slowly, his face unreadable, he looked at the alien symbols carved into the floor, then raised his eyes to the ring. Luthek followed, steps heavier, slower. All eyes were on them, not just nobles, warriors, servants, scholars. The whole empire watched through live channels. Zara had made this a public moment, a show of dominance. But as the bondkeeper lifted the rings, something unexpected happened. Riven reached forward and took both rings, holding them together in one hand. "I will speak," he said. The music stopped. The hall went silent. Riven turned to Luthek and raised his voice so all could hear. "This was meant to shame you. This was meant to control me, but I reject that." Gasps moved through the crowd. Riven stepped forward, placing one ring in Luthek's hand. "If we do this," he said, "we do it as equals. No master, no servant. Only warriors." Luthek looked down at the ring, then at the man before him. He had never imagined a human could show such honor. His hands shook slightly as he closed his fingers around the ring. He didn't speak, but he nodded once. They placed the rings on together, and a light flashed between them. A soft glow tied their hands for a moment, then faded. In the throne room, Queen Zara watched the broadcast, eyes narrowed. This was not what she had planned. Instead of humiliation, the people saw unity. Instead of weakness, they saw strength and balance, and for the first time in her rule, she felt something dangerous, the feeling of losing control. Later that night, as the moons crossed paths in the sky, Riven sat alone in the palace garden. Luthek was resting, and the stars above whispered quietly. A small shadow moved behind the trees, barely visible. Riven didn't turn, but he spoke. "You're late." A hooded figure stepped into the light, face hidden. "We lost one of our agents," the figure said. Your arrival triggered a deep scan. The Queen knows something is off. Riven nodded. She suspects. The figure handed him a data crystal. The ship is still cloaked outside the system, but we found something in the archives. The Kelnari are hiding an ancient weapon. Riven took the crystal. What kind? The Shadow's voice dropped. Not a weapon of steel. A weapon of blood. Riven looked up at the palace towers, golden and sharp. So much power, so much fear hidden behind beauty. He closed his hand around the crystal. The Queen thought. She had made her move, but the real game had just changed, and now he wasn't playing alone. The wind in the palace garden was too still. Leaves hung without motion. The air thick with silence. Captain Riven sat alone under a tree with silver branches. The data crystal clutched tightly in his hand. It felt heavier than it should, not by weight, but by truth. The kind of truth that changed the shape of history. He waited until he was sure no eyes were watching, no ears listening. Then he activated the crystal. A small blue light floated in the air, showing old images, broken. Records, half erased by time and fear. The words were not in English, not in Kelnari. They were in a language older than both, written in sharp symbols that moved like flame. But Riven could read them. He had been trained to. He watched the recording in silence, eyes steady. His face never changed, but inside something shifted. The Kelnari were not the first rulers of this sector. Before them, long before the stars had maps, there had been another empire, and they had left behind a weapon. Not a machine, not a bomb. Something worse, something alive. The screen flashed, and the last words of the record burned into view. The blood remembers. Riven closed the crystal and slid it into his sleeve. Behind him, a soft step on stone. He didn't turn. He already knew it was Luthak. You didn't sleep, the warrior said. Standing beside him, arms crossed. Didn't need to. Riven answered, still watching the stars. Luthak stayed quiet for a moment, then sat down on the grass. There was no hate in him now, only a strange sense of calm. The kind that came after drowning in shame and finding dry land again. I used to think power was strength, Luthak said. Muscle, victory, fear. But now I see, real power is control. Riven glanced at him. Control over others? No, Luthak said. Control over yourself. They sat in silence, not as enemies, not as masters, but as something new, not friends, not yet, but not strangers anymore, inside the palace. Queen Zara stood before a black wall made of crystal. It shimmered when she touched it, showing flickers of hidden memories. Her spies had returned, only 2 out of 5. The others were dead or worse. Silent, she had the reports, the images, the readings, but they didn't make sense. A human ship, alive, breathing, cloaked in tech she had never seen. A captain with no record, no military rank, no family. Just one word from Earth's deep systems, buried under 10 security levels. Ghost-class operative, Zara whispered. The words, her voice soft with confusion and anger. What are you, Riven? He was calm when he fought. He was calm when she insulted him. He was even calm when she tried to shame him. But that calm wasn't weakness. It was design. Someone had trained him not just to survive, but to walk into the lion's mouth without fear. She stared at the screen, at the symbol found inside his ship. It didn't match any known human flag, but deep in her memory, she remembered seeing it once, in a Forbidden's archive, during a war council long ago. The humans called it Project Orpheon. It was shut down, or so they claimed, a project made not for war, but for infiltration, for entering empires and turning them inside out. Her fingers clenched. She had allowed something into her palace, something dangerous. And now it was sitting beside her best warrior, wearing her ring. She turned away from the screen. No more watching, she whispered. If he wants war, I'll give him fire. That same night, deep below the palace, in a hidden chamber, the ancient blood stirred. It moved slowly, like red smoke inside a glass tank, alive, waiting, hungry. A small crack formed on the side of the tank. It had sensed something, something familiar. something it had not felt for thousands of years, in the garden above. Riven stood and looked toward the throne tower. He could feel it too. Something waking, something dangerous. He looked at Luthek, who now watched him with quiet understanding. "I came to speak," Riven said. "But the truth is, I came because something old is rising. And you knew this?" Luthek asked, his voice low. "I suspected," Riven said. "But now I'm sure." Luthek's fists tightened. "Then we're not dealing with politics." "No," Riven said. "We're dealing with memory." Behind them, the trees whispered. The wind finally moving again, but this wind didn't come from the sky. It came from something deeper, older, a breath from something buried under the palace. The kind of breath that came before a scream. The palace bells did not ring. No warning was given, no message was sent. But the air changed, it thickened. Like a storm hiding behind silence, Riven opened his eyes before sunrise. He felt it first, not a sound, not a light, just pressure, deep in his chest, a signal. Maybe, or something older. He stood without speaking, dressed quickly, and stepped into the hallway. Luthek followed, already awake. As if the same weight had reached him too. Neither man said a word. The silence between them was sharp, but not cold. It was the silence of men preparing for something they couldn't fully name. As they turned the corner, the lights above them dimmed, then flickered, then died. The palace went dark in the throne room. Queen Zara stood at the center, alone, surrounded by her elite guards. She wore a robe made of nightshade armor, pulsing with violet energy. No crown, no throne, only fire in her eyes. Her voice echoed across the chamber. "This is no longer a question of diplomacy," she said. "This is survival." From every wall, the guards emerged, over 200 strong. Armor shining with heat and fury. They didn't speak, didn't move. They waited. She lifted her hand, and the crystal floor beneath her glowed. The old blood had been awakened. It answered only to her. It moved beneath the stone. Following her command, Riven and Luthek entered the main hall. At once, they knew. This was no meeting. It was an ambush. Zara stepped forward, her voice steady. "You played your part well, human. You confused my court, turned my warrior, and walked through my house like a guest. But now, you stand before me as what you truly are." Riven's voice was calm. "And what do you think I am?" She pointed her staff at him, a threat. The walls shifted, and from them came the sound of metal grinding. Something was being unsealed, deep underground. Riven looked toward the floor. "You're waking it up," he said, voice low. "That thing wasn't meant to return." Zara's eyes narrowed. "I decide what returns." She said, "I am queen." "No," Riven said, stepping forward. "You're afraid." The guards moved at once, charging from all sides. Luthek stepped in front of Riven without hesitation, his body a wall of motion. Steel clashed, fists flew, power surged. But Riven didn't draw a weapon. He walked forward, slowly, directly, toward the queen, each time a guard tried to stop him. They were thrown aside by Luthek. The warrior fought not for the queen, but for something more, for truth, for choice, for a future he could believe in. Zara raised her staff high, and from the floor, red light cracked upward like lightning. A great roar echoed from beneath, not mechanical, not alive, something in between. The ancient weapon was waking. The blood beneath the palace had felt Riven's presence, and now it wanted him. Riven stopped just a few feet from the queen. "You're not in control anymore," he said. Zara's eyes burned. "I will not be undone by a ghost. I'm not a ghost." Riven said, "I'm a warning." The floor split open, and from the crack rose a shape. Tall, twisting, black like space, red like war. It had no face, no voice, but its presence filled every inch of the room. The air turned heavy. Hearts slowed, light dimmed. Even the queen stepped back. Just once. The creature did not move toward her. It looked at Riven, if such a thing could look. And it stopped, not in fear, but in recognition. Riven stared at it, his hand at his side. not reaching for a weapon, but for something under his sleeve, he whispered. So soft only the creature could hear. You remember me? The red light inside the beast pulsed. Slowly, a sound filled the chamber. Not a roar, not a scream, a voice, not from a mouth, but from the blood. The walls, the air itself. We do, it said. All of us. The queen stepped back again. This was no weapon, it was a memory given form, and now, it had found the one it had been waiting for. Luthek stood behind Riven, breathing hard, armor cracked, but still standing. What is it? He asked. Riven looked ahead, not blinking. It's the first war, he said. Still alive. The queen raised her staff one last time, but this time, her hands shook. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The creature turned toward her now, and the air whispered again, Your blood is not worthy. The great creature stood tall and silent, its red and black form glowing faintly under the shattered ceiling of the throne room. The blood inside it pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat long forgotten. The light flickered across the walls, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Queen Zara's breath caught in her throat, for the first time. She felt something she had never known. Fear. Riven stepped forward, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He looked up at the creature, and then back at the queen. This is the past, he said softly. But it is also the future. The creature moved closer to him, its presence filling the room. It did not attack. It did not speak. It simply waited. Behind Riven, Luthek stood steady, his armor cracked, his body worn, but his spirit stronger than ever. Zara watched them both, her hands trembling as she held her broken staff. This ends now, she said, voice breaking. Or it begins forever. Riven turned to her. We don't have to be enemies, he said, but if you choose war, I will stand. The creature's light grew brighter. And then, with a sound like thunder and silence combined, it split the air with a pulse of energy, a wave that washed over everyone in the hall. The queen fell to her knees, her strength drained, but her eyes shone with a new understanding. Riven held out his hand, not to fight, but to offer peace. Luthek stepped beside him, his voice steady. We fight together, he said. For the future, not the past. The creature bent toward the queen, its light wrapping around her like a cloak. Her face softened. The fire in her eyes changed, from anger to hope. Outside, the stars shifted, the moons aligned, and somewhere far beyond, a new dawn was coming. The queen whispered, Then we fight as one. The palace was silent again, but this time it was a silence of promise, of war ended and a new story just beginning.